Hi, Drew. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Doing great. How's this week been for you?
Been pretty awesome. Get to hang out in Seattle with all my favorite people.
It sounds like you might have an itch to move here, too.
A little bit. Looking at some see. We'll see how it
no
goes.
promises, I imagine, but...
No. Well, yeah, it's kind of up in the air. It's hard to relocate a lot of rabbits, sell a house, move the wife.
Which one's more difficult?
The wife.
Okay. Although she sounds to be doing the more research.
She is. Yeah, she's super into it, but you know how it is.
Pacific
Travel and all
Northwest, it just hooks you, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's gorgeous up here. The weather's great. It's a cool town.
The people?
Yeah. People and the area. I mean, not that we don't have trees in Savannah. We do. We have these gorgeous live oaks, but up here you've got these, real trees. They're huge. They're gigantic. The trees are so big. The mountains are gigantic. Everything is so big here. Even the water feels bigger,
Right.
You see it when you're flying over, and it's just wow, that's a lot of water. The Atlantic Ocean just feels so oh, look, it's a little baby ocean.
Right.
When you see the Pacific, it's crazy.
There's something about going to the ocean and just standing there and trying to take it all in and fathoming. It's a little bit like looking up into the stars, right? In the sense that you feel like this little drop of nothing.
Yeah.
And there's something about walking up to those mountains, too, that gives that same feeling.
Right. The vastness of everything. I'm just a little person.
Yep. These trees are way bigger, way older, and way wiser than I am. So this week has been pretty cool for us. We've been hanging out with a bunch of people. You and I have kind of connected some more.
Yep.
The first time we met was actually here in this space.
Mm-hmm.
And since then, we've been kind of realizing we have a lot in common, actually.
Yeah. Right down to the shoes.
Right down to the shoes. That's true. So give me a tour of your shoes here.
Okay. So I'll give you the backstory too. So I had lower back problems for a long time. I have a what's called a lumbar sprain, where that in conjunction with scoliosis. It's light scoliosis. It's not my back doesn't look like a Q, but right at the base it pitches forward and to the right. So I'm crooked. Just a little bit.
It's okay. We still love you.
Right. But even being just a little bit crooked can really throw you off. So I had back pain for years and years and years, starting when I was a teenager. And then I started wearing Chuck Taylors. And I was like, oh, hey, look at this. My back hurts less. Huh. Well, what happens if I just go all the way flat? So I got some Soft Star shoes out of Portland, Oregon. Makes these wonderful handmade leather shoes that are completely zero drop. They're called barefoot shoes.
I've seen them. They're 4 or 6 mil or something like that.
Yeah,
right?
They're super, super thin. So I started wearing those, and my back problems went away.
And so, from the Chuck Taylors to the Soft Stars, was this just instinct? You just thought, okay, this is better, so I'm going to keep going on this timeline? Or was there someone who influenced you, or some research or something?
So the best man at my wedding had bought some Vivo barefoot shoes, which are similar, but they're not quite as extreme as the Soft Stars. And so I said, well, that looks cool. Let's take it to the logical extreme.
All right.
And get as thin as possible. And I do have some Vivo barefoot shoes as well, but now that I work in media and I can let my personality be a little bigger, I figured, okay, well, those shoes have not really gotten the use that they used to. They just kind of sit in their hole, and I'm wearing my burgundy with stars on them, Soft Star shoes that I had custom made. My wife calls them my hippie shoes. She hates them.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. She thinks they're hideous.
What?
But I love them. I'm on my second pair. I wore the first pair out. I wore them until they got holes in the heels. And then I wore them for another year after that. And then I finally convinced her to let me buy another pair. Because, they're not cheap. They're $120.
But if you're wearing them literally every single day, all the time, right? Even this pair, I realized they were the identical pair because you have a toe patch on them.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I do have I wore out the right big toe area. And I actually did that pretty quick.
Really?
So I kind of fucked up.
So here we go.
Well, what I should have done was I should have soaked them in water when I first got them and stuffed a bunch of paper in them to help them kind of relax and break them in before I put them on. But I didn't do that this time. I just kind of shoved my feet in them and I was like, yes, my shoes are here. I'm so happy. So I was just wearing them straight away. And I didn't like size them out a little bit before I started wearing them. And that's how I got a hole in the tip of the shoe. So, but my wife was kind enough to put a patch on it, and
I think the patch gives them a lot of personality.
Yeah, I almost kind of wish I had her put the patch itself on the outside so that it was like more obvious.
There's always the next pair.
Yeah, right? True. Or the next hole.
And have you done any, like, so one way that I got into this and that I started learning about this was through barefoot running.
Okay.
But it sounds like for you, these are just everyday shoes. Have you ever done any barefoot running at all?
Well, I have run in these shoes.
Well, that's sort of what I'm referring to.
No,
quasi barefoot running.
I know what you mean, though, like taking them out on a trail and just going to town. No, I haven't really.
Any hiking or anything like that? Like some non-flat surfaces?
Well, sure. Okay, so wearing them around all the time, even here in Seattle, on Monday we went to Friday Island and we had to hike down a trail from the parking lot, like. Seattle, you hike from the parking lot to where you're going. So, yeah, a little bit, but I haven't ever necessarily gone like out of my way to go to some specific, trailhead or anything. And just because I haven't done that in probably 7 or 8 years, I haven't like really done any real hiking since I moved out of, Appalachia. But no, I mean, whatever life throws at you, right?
Yeah, it sounds like you just wear them in whatever situation. But how's your back doing now? Because it's been a few years now you've been wearing these, right? So
it's great. It's my lower back doesn't like hurt barely at all. And another part of it is the mattress. I got rid of like the traditional mattress and I got a Tufton needle.
Nice. Yes, those are amazing.
Oh, it's so good. It's so good. We looked at like them and Purple and Casper and decided the Tufton needle was the way to go. And I'm so glad we did.
Yeah,
so,
no turning back after you do that, right?
Oh, man, I know. And like you have like 100 days to try it. On like day 3, I was like, there's no way this thing's going back. This is mine now. So
nice.
Yeah.
It really pays to learn that stuff about your body. Like I've been going through, as you know, a little bit of a food journey the last several years. But man, it certainly pays to figure out the optimizations for your own body. And some of them apply to many people. Like I know the zero drop shoes work for a lot of runners who've been having injuries and stuff like that.
Oh, okay.
Because there's something about running shoes that once you wrap your head around the industry and the sort of the way your body wants to run. If you look at how our feet are built, they're just giant springs,
right,
to absorb impact and things like that. So
so if we put our tinfoil hats on just for a moment, the whole thing about arches, right? Your arches are supposed to be flexible. So as you're running, the arch is supposed to compress and expand. And right, so people get these shoes that full arch support means that your arch is rigid. It doesn't move at all. And I don't get it, but I mean, I know that, foot experts for however, dozens of years, because I don't think shoes have really been built like tennis shoes for longer than like 70, 80 years.
Right.
So that's kind of a new experiment, if you ask me.
Absolutely. And what's interesting to me is that you said foot experts and you kind of did an air quotes thing there.
Right, yeah.
And, but I see that in so many different areas of life, food experts is a whole other question, right?
Sure.
And so I sort of self-identify as a contrarian.
Okay.
And I wonder if that applies to you as well, in that you kind of like testing the boundaries a little bit.
Oh, sure. So I don't know if I would go with the term contrarian for myself, more just curious and inquisitive. And
that's where it starts.
Yeah, sure. Not necessarily believing that everybody who talks about something with authority necessarily has their shit together. Just kind of being aware that there's a lot more out there than we don't know than we do. And even if you think you have something really pegged, like I really, really know this, there's always something that can throw you for a loop. How long did we think the earth was flat? And, some still do, but
let's not talk about
that. Let's not go there. Just leave that one in the corner.
Mm-hmm.
But how long did we think that versus how long have we known about the black hole at the center of the galaxy? How long have we known about other black holes that are floating around in space? We are discovering so many new things all the time that I never find it a safe bet to just say this is definitively true.
Right. Knowledge is not fixed.
Right. And that's why I don't identify for any religion either. I'm agnostic.
Okay.
So, I don't have anything against people who take things on faith, but to me it requires way too much faith to be an atheist or to be, any other religion where you can't. This is obviously stuff that cannot be proven. So,
that's convenient, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's just beyond that. It's okay. If people want to believe in this, that, or the other because that's how they personally feel, I'm very, very sensitive to that. I've taken a lot of religion courses. I actually know quite a bit about a lot of different religions, but I can't subscribe to any of them because of my refusal to believe things that I don't necessarily understand fully or can't quite prove, it's just not something I'm comfortable doing, if that makes sense.
Is it because you have would you say you have a really sort of a technical scientific mind first and things need to fit into that?
I don't know. My degree is in the arts. I've spent a lot of time in the arts. Audio is probably more artistic than it is technical. There's plenty of technical elements to it, but I don't know if I'm quite a left-brainer that way, or right-brainer. I honestly can't ever remember which one is which. But I think you take my point. I don't know if it's because of a scientific nature or just because I'm just kind of weird like that, or kind of not, not willing to take things on faith.
Right. I think being weird is a feature, actually.
It's not a bug.
No. It's definitely something you want to keep.
Yeah, sure.
For me, the more I learn about you, the more I realize that we're very alike, and we often get confused. Actually, some people tend to confuse us, which I'm fine with.
It has happened so many times. I love it.
Similar height. I don't know. Your hair is way better than mine, but we'll see.
Maybe not today.
But there's some sort of links to me in there, in that you mentioned being curious and having an open mind and being okay with changing your ideas, right? Sure. That's a really important thing as well. Yeah. And I wondered how that connected with Linux for you. Linux is a little bit of a deep topic that you always end up learning something new. Mm-hmm. And if you sort of pretend that you know it all, then it's very, you're very quickly in a bad place.
Right.
Things are changing so quickly.
And it's just such a huge landscape.
Yeah, fair enough.
I don't think even Linus Torvalds, while being the kernel maintainer, could say, I definitively know everything about Linux. It just doesn't happen that way. But I came to it, I was in high school, and so this was probably 1999, 2000, somewhere in there. And a friend of mine had Red Hat Linux, pre-Red Hat Enterprise Linux, just Red Hat Linux. And he had it installed, and it had X Windows on it. And he said, hey, come here, look at this cool thing. And that was the first I'd ever heard of, seen, touched, tasted, smelled Linux. And I was like, what? Wait, what is this thing? It kind of looks like Windows, but why is the cursor an X and not like a pointer? That's weird.
These are simple questions, but profound.
Right. And I found it really cool, and I immediately was intrigued and like, okay, I want to know more about this thing. So I went and got myself a magazine and put Mandrake Linux on family computer.
Nice.
And I screwed up the dual boot order, so it went to Linux first. And my dad was like, I don't know what to do with this thing. Can you fix the boot order so that it at least goes to Windows first? And okay, Dad, yeah, sure thing. I got you. Eventually got my own computer and, kind of went crazy trying out different things with Linux, getting, IRC installed and running. And, this is back in the day of 56Ks. So, I had to not be on all the time. So, I had to plan my dial-up internet.
Been there.
But yeah, and of course, it just grew from there. And I've been, slowly piecing together more and more knowledge through the years. And in the past few years, I feel like my knowledge has grown much more quickly than it had ever before.
For what reason?
Well, part of it is this job.
Okay, fair
Part
enough.
of it is my last job working for an MSP where I was doing more business and computing. So even though their target wasn't Linux, just because I love Linux, I was putting at least part of my focus into learning more about it. And I did get to do some Linux stuff, mostly like server-side appliance stuff. Got to work with Datto a lot, and learning the internals of the Datto was really fun. Learning more about the deeper Linux networking and how to, connect to OpenVPN. We'll call them routers, but they're essentially virtual appliances, and get a computer that joins a VLAN with that firewall, that virtual firewall, to then automatically route its traffic to an open VPN running in a data center somewhere so that it can have an American IP. Like that kind of thing was really fun for me.
Sounds like a playground, really.
It kind of was, yeah. And now, with JB, I get to do even more.
And you've got a massive smile on while you're saying that.
I'm so happy about it. It's like I feel like I'm home.
Okay. Wow, what a feeling.
Right? Yeah, like my whole career path has been kind of building to this, and I'm finally here, and now I just get to enjoy all of this and all of you and our listeners too. And everybody has been so accepting and inviting and wonderful, and I'm just super happy to be here.
Isn't it great to find a place where you can wear your crazy shoes and have your crazy hair or whatever, right? And just,
everybody just says, "Go, man, go!"
Yeah,
it's great.
And I've had that, every single time I've met up with people in the JB community, it's been really the same. It's been, hey, be more you, because that's what we like about you.
Right.
And I'm assuming for you, you're touching on the community and the internals of JB on a daily basis. So it's just like, hurrah, beat Drew. Go 100% Drew, right?
Yeah, and that's what I get to do now, day in, day out. Even if I'm sitting there spending my days editing, which is pretty frequent, that's what I was hired to do. So, but even then, like I get to actively decide which direction I'm taking with like how to mix something, and I feel like I actually have the autonomy to decide a little bit about the sound of a particular show and to start moving something towards something that's maybe a little more natural for me. There's not a lot of like pushback for that. It's just like, oh, that's cool. Yeah. Okay.
Nice.
I like, which is not something that you're used to coming from like super corporate culture where it's do it my way. Do not argue with me.
It's more like hierarchical, would you say?
Right. Yeah, exactly. So
less collaborative.
Exactly. And part of that is being, back in media, entertainment, the arts, whatever you want to call it. But part of it is just the fact that I think that the Linux community especially is very receptive to you can do your own thing and you can do it in your own way, and that's fine.
it really encourages niches of niches of niches, right?
It's for better or for worse,
Right. Well, it allows explorations in a whole bunch of angles that maybe the corporate world
Right.
would have no interest, right? But then these flourish into projects that people are super passionate about.
And sure, we have fragmentation. Sure, there are, however many GitHub projects out there with abandoned code and all of that. But at the end of the day, there's a lot more good stuff than there is not good stuff, to my mind.
And you've been watching this happen for years and years now.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I've been growing with it.
Literally. Like you were pretty young when you first got connected to this. And it sounds like you didn't really have too many gaps in there. You were just always diving right in and learning different aspects about it and implementing your own technologies at home and stuff like that.
That's just kind of the way I am, though. I just kind of throw myself into projects and learning stuff and like, oh, I want to do this. Okay. How do I do this? All right. Let's go do it. Okay. Yeah.
Do you tend to do like 3 days of research and then throw yourself in, or do you just throw yourself in and learn what you need to along the way?
I think some of it's a safety curve. Like I did a little more research on how to change my brake pads properly before I actually went and did that than say, let's throw a piece of software on my server and hopefully it doesn't crash. A little more life and death with the brakes.
Okay, got it.
Got to bleed the lines correctly so that when you step on the brake, something
They actually do
happens.
something. Yeah, that's important.
Yeah. So yeah, I think it just the safety curve is kind of the important part of that question.
Sounds like a pragmatic approach.
I hope so.
Just crazy enough, and yet with a mind to safety.
Right. Not that I haven't done, stupid shit like getting on ladders at, a little higher than they should be, or maybe this thing isn't secured well enough or something. Yeah. I've done all that stuff too. I'm trying not to now that I'm like, married and old.
Married and old. You're not that old, Drew.
I know, but tell that to my knees.
Right. Well, maybe the shoes will help. I don't know.
Yeah.
What are there any projects you're working on right now that you're really super jazzed about?
I feel like I'm kind of between stuff right now.
Okay.
Getting ready for this sprint was kind of a project in and of itself.
I can imagine.
A little exhausting because we had a lot of like pre-records and things like that I had to, sift through, and I didn't quite get them all done. I was hoping to be like a week and a half ahead coming into the sprint, but I was only like half a week ahead. So I've got, some stuff to do. But as far as projects, I've always got stuff going on at home for sure. Like, I have a lot of rabbits and
a fluffle of them.
Yeah, I do.
Some
it
would
is
say.
a fluffle. Yeah. And right now we're trying to rejigger their living arrangements. So that's certainly a project, and they're picky. So
They have personalities, right?
Mm-hmm. Like our newest is Drew Jr.
Come on, really? Why is this?
Because I finally got Jackie to let me name a rabbit Drew Jr. I've been trying for years, and finally I broke her down.
Does she get a Jackie next, or is she just not interested?
She's not interested.
All right.
She could totally have a Jackie Jr. if she wanted to, but I just don't think she
cares.
She's not quite, on that spectrum that I am.
All right.
Like, yeah, no, she's probably a little more sensible. So, yeah. But Drew Jr., while I've been here, he and Min, his like roommate, essentially, had been moved downstairs, and Jackie has informed me that they decided to tear up our nice leather couch.
Oh,
yeah, I know. And yeah, and she even covered it in blankets and everything. He tore through the blankets to get down and tear at the leather couch.
Wow.
Yeah, he's being a real butthead. So got to figure out something for him because we like the room they're in, but we don't like their behavior in the room they're in. So I don't know.
That's such an adventure too, of trying to discover that stuff. And once you get it, it's amazing for everyone, right?
Well,
but
I hope
in that
so.
interim stage,
Hopefully I get there and it's great, but yeah, I don't know. Figure something out.
you were showing me earlier how to record a little bit of audio.
Mm-hmm.
We recorded something that is near and dear to my heart, and I think to many listeners' hearts. Would you give us a tour of that?
Sure. Okay, so we wanted to record the Jupiter Bell because we didn't have a good sample of the Jupiter Bell. There it is. So what we ended up doing is just pulling out my handy recorder, my H5. It's a wonderful little piece of equipment. It's by Zoom. I highly recommend it. Use it as an audio interface or a portable field recorder. And in this particular case, what we did was we hooked up an RE20 and a Sennheiser, I don't remember the model number, but a Sennheiser like handheld mic. And also the microphones on top of the handy recorder, and got them all right there next to the bell. Dialed it in so that we weren't like peeking out too bad, but we could still capture the tail of the reverb from the bell, and ding, and record. And hopefully we get a nice good sample so that Chris can stop using that one that we're not super into. And
The not quite studio bell.
yeah.
So we'll see where that takes us. This is trial one. It's something Drew wanted to do from,
Right.
I think, your first visit here.
Yeah, during my orientation, I was up here, and there was something that I wanted to get done, and then it didn't happen. There was just too much going
There
on.
were a few things happening.
But today, it was, you picked me up from the hotel, and we came over here, and it's like, well, we got some time. Let's record a bell.
Which seems like a strange to do on your, as your first task for the day, but it's a way to get you warmed up, I guess, right?
I feel like I've had weirder.
All right, I couldn't imagine. So some of the stuff you've recorded the most, I think, is bands, right? Is that or helped in the audio sphere?
I was never really a recording engineer.
Okay.
That's kind of a new journey for me, is being in the studio side of things. I was a live audio engineer for right around a decade. And so I would I'd show up, do load in, mix the band, and then load out. And I also did some of the bigger events with like AAA bands and things.
Yeah.
And for those, it would be, load in, help their audio engineer come to terms with the space, and then load out at the end of the show. And so I've done that whole spectrum. I didn't go on tour because I didn't want to, but I did do one-off gigs a lot when I was freelance, where, drive down to Florida and mix a band, and then drive back the next day, drive up to Pennsylvania the next week. Yeah. I did that for years, and that was grueling enough. I didn't want to get in a bus and be away from my dog and everybody that I knew for, 6 months at a time. So, it's getting close to 30, and it's like, wow, you really don't make a lot of money in this field. It's a lot of fun when you're in your 20s, and I'm so glad I did it because, I feel like it shaped a lot of who I am, but I was ready to maybe do something else. So I shifted my career right around 28, 29 years old and went into IT and worked for an MSP for about 5 years. And then I decided to split the difference and come work for JB.
Do a little bit of both.
That's right. Yeah. So fortunately, I had kind of a right place at the right time moment, where I had emailed Joe Ressington and just said, hey, I saw that, Linux Academy has acquired the network, and, I'm wondering, are you the only editor? Because it seems like you wouldn't be able to like take any days off, no vacations, anything like that. Or, I know you guys are doing some community shows too. I do edit some podcasts. If you need help, let me know. I was basically offering to volunteer. And Joe sends me back a very concise email saying, oh, no, we're good, thanks. Fast forward about, 9 months. And Joe's come to the conclusion that he can't take a vacation. And, we want to do more shows. Well, Jupiter Broadcasting wanted to do more shows. And he could use some help. So he emails me back and says, "Hey, are you still interested?" Why, yes. Yes, I am. And now I'm here.
I often say that 50% of anything is just showing up.
Mm-hmm.
And in this case, just kind of putting your neck out there and saying, hey, this sounds interesting, right? Okay, it might have taken 9 months, but now look, you're here. And you described it earlier as sort of the perfect place for someone like you.
Yeah. Well, I feel kind of uniquely qualified. You know?
Isn't that perfect when you can find a job,
right,
or any project that sort of brings so many different aspects of you and throws them all together, right?
Yeah, well, and not to say that there aren't other pro audio people in Linux, but I don't know. I feel like there aren't a ton of people who necessarily have my exact skill set.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like I got in at the right moment, and I got in with the right people, and it couldn't have gone any better if I'd planned it.
Well, it sounds like in some way you did plan it, you know. Just to rewind a little bit, you mentioned how some of the live audio engineering stuff you were doing really shaped you as a person.
Mm-hmm.
You dive into that a little bit? What was it about that scene and those experiences?
Much like the Linux world, production, live entertainment production is a very interesting space with some interesting characters.
I often say interesting isn't exactly a descriptive word. Is there any?
Okay, yeah, fair enough. So my degree is in drama.
Okay.
Right. I went to UNC Asheville. I got a degree in drama, graduating in 2007. And being in the theater alone is an experience, right? Like, you're going to meet and work with some people who are well outside of the mainstream.
Some pretty eccentric folk.
Yes. And moving from there into live audio for like concerts and things, because that's where the money and the work was more so than theater. You get a different set, but not remarkably different. Everybody still like has at least one screw a little loose, maybe not fully like rattling, but it's a quarter turn out at least, right? And that's everybody.
That's the minimum.
That's the minimum, right? Or you can scale all the way up to, somebody who the screw is gone and everything is rattling. You spend a lot of time with a lot of people with very disparate viewpoints and very different lifestyles. And
yet you're all in this space together.
Yes. And you all have to get along.
You have no choice, do you?
Right. Yeah. Well, even if you do not like the person, you still have to have a show go on in 30 minutes. So put your shit aside, get it done. And then, after the show or even during the show, when you've got nothing to do for an hour and a half, then you can go and scream into the void and really, get it out. And then, oh, hey, look, it's time for us to go and work together again to get this loaded out.
Let's figure it out again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you always have to work out those problems, no matter what, because that show is going to happen. There are 3,000 people out there. They have all paid. And your petty stuff is not a reason to call off the show. Doesn't matter. Like, I've had artists on stage yelling at me for doing my job the way it's supposed to be done, but not the way that they wanted it done.
Okay.
And I've been flipped off. I've been like on stage during a show. I've had that happen.
Come on.
And I had to stand there and stare this guy down, stare daggers at him, just basically telling him no.
Is it because the space required?
Yeah. So this is actually a pretty good story. So the worst show I ever saw in my life was this show.
I love this already. Please continue.
I'm not going to give the name of the
fair enough.
person, but it was a cooking show. And the gentleman who does this cooking show, he's fairly popular and has shows on television, and decided to do some live tour. And he had a mixologist as his opening act. And the mixologist was wanting to, like, hype up the crowd and really get them going. But there were people who had spent, 10x on tickets to sit on the stage.
Wow.
Yeah, which is actually not an abnormal thing. Like, a lot of times with high dollar events or things like this, you can actually get on-stage tickets, or, box seats used to be this way. You went to the theater to be seen, not to see. So a little bit of theater history for you.
Can you describe a mixologist as well?
Oh, yeah, sure. Okay, so a mixologist is somebody who makes drinks.
Okay, got it.
They are, it's a fancy bartender.
They often have like these elaborate tricks, and it's kind of theater at the same time.
Right, exactly. So that's his thing, and he wants the music to be cranked. But I've got blue hairs on stage,
right,
sitting next to these speakers, and I'm not going to push them to 108 decibels. Not gonna do it.
That's kind of you.
Yeah. Well, who's my target audience here? Is it this mixologist that I don't care about?
Nor will you likely see again.
Right. Or is it, the lady sitting on stage who's there to spend probably 10 grand in slots after the show?
Wow.
Because this is when I worked for a casino.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, we want to keep the lady happy.
Uh-huh.
Know who pays your bills. It's an important thing, right? So this guy is like yelling at me on stage, on the mic, flipping me off, like the whole thing. And I literally, at that point, I stepped away from the board and I crossed my arms and I just shook my head at him. And he got chewed out after he got off stage. And he came over and started trying to apologize to me. I still wasn't quite over it, but, it's just like, yeah, man, whatever. Go away, I'm working. Like, because, there was still a show going on.
Fair enough.
There are people on stage pretending to cook.
It sounds like, I don't know, there's a level of professionalism that goes into, how you were describing the crew, how there's a professionalism, you got to put your shit on the side, right? But this guy is on stage just letting it out there for everybody to see, and that's a little bit disappointing, really.
And I'm not lying when I say it was the worst show I ever saw in my life. Like, they had clearly never done a live show, and were trying to figure it out as they were going along, and they were pissing everybody off along the way.
Right.
Half the audience left within the first hour.
That's embarrassing.
It was really bad.
Right, so another incentive not to piss off the people who are actually staying.
Right. I don't know if they continued their tour. I will say that the guy who that show was, his restaurants don't tend to stay open very long either.
I see. So we went into that story. You were describing how these experiences have sort of shaped you in some ways. So obviously interacting with people and having to figure out how to deal with people from perhaps very different backgrounds and really different eclectic folk, let's say.
Sure.
What other ways, like for you internally, did it shape you? I know the schedules are kind of tricky.
Yeah.
And
that would probably be the next biggest way, is that my internal clock doesn't work right.
Oh.
When you're used to, during the week, there's not a lot going on. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, those are your big days, and you're probably pulling 40 to 60 hours in the span of those 4 days.
Wow.
And then, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, not much going on. You're still kind of recovering from the fact that you had, 12 to 16 hour day Thursday, setting up again on Friday. And then say the show's on Saturday. And you go in and you work from morning load in all the way until the last case is back on the truck and out the door. So that would be, say starting at 9 a.m. And at this time, I had moved closer. My commute had been an hour and a half each way. I moved a lot closer. So it was only about 45 minutes each way. So that was a lot better. still kind of crappy.
Still, yeah.
That would mean that I would be getting up around, 7:30, out the door around 8, getting there with coffee in hand around 9, ready to go, lead a crew through load-in, and then there's a long stretch of the day after load-in's done where there's not much going on. Maybe hang out with the front of house guy and just shoot the shit a little bit, and then hang out in my office, read some news. Finally, a show happens, and then the show ends, and then we're putting things back in cases, taking set pieces back down, loading all the trucks. Last box goes on the truck. Everybody says, "Thanks, bye." And then you're exhausted, so you end up sitting in your office with the house crew for like an hour. Just sitting there, maybe having a beer or something like that. Then it's time to go home. And then you get home, and it's like 4 a.m.
Oh, man.
And then you sleep for like a day.
Yeah.
And then maybe you don't come in on Monday. Maybe you don't come in on Tuesday.
Which is totally acceptable, I imagine.
Well, yeah, I was hourly. So at this point, I'm at overtime. I'm in overtime already, So... like, okay, yeah, it doesn't matter. So long as, I had at least 40 hours, I was good, right? So doing that like every week, that takes a toll.
Oh, I can imagine.
So it's not uncommon for me to be like awake at 4 a.m, which is great for Jupiter Broadcasting because...
get a lot of stuff done.
I'm essentially on Seattle time already.
Yeah.
So... yeah, that's it is a little lucky for me that my job happens to be based around West Coast time. Because the my day starts at noon thing kind of works. Like, it's kind of cool.
And so that schedule from those years of working that has just stuck with you. You haven't been able to turn it around, or have you just not been motivated? Or
well, so I did try. When I worked for an MSP, I started the day at 8 a.m. every day.
That's a 9 to 5, isn't it? Or 8 to 4 or whatever.
8 to 6.
Oh, okay. Got it.
And usually more like 8 to 8. So, yeah, and for that job, I kind of just got used to sleeping 4 hours a night.
That's crazy.
I know. So, 4 to 6. 4 to 6 was pretty normal for me. And I was tired all the time, and I didn't love it. And it's a lot better. And, I get a lot more sleep now than I used to, and it's perfect. So that definitely is another thing that's much better about this job than my past job. At least for me personally.
And so can you describe for me some of the areas, because this is kind of, you mentioned it was a unique combination of your interests, this current, where you are now.
Sure.
Where are you headed? Like, what are you growing in? What are you super jazzed about and pushing?
More audio. I am playing with more audio.
You've been
now.
playing with some pretty fancy stuff here from at least our perspectives, right? It seems really great.
Like, I get to play with new equipment that I hadn't really, especially because since I went from live to studio.
Yeah.
This is a whole new segment for me. Like, not that it's hugely different.
But there must be an amount of control that's liberating.
Yeah. Well, that, but at the same time, it's also a little more restrictive because everything, doing live, everything is getting, just pumped out into the ether, right? And then it's gone.
Right.
It's very temporary. Like I'd record a lot of shows and hand them to the band after the show, but maybe 3-4 people going to listen to that. If it's a bigger show, of course, it could be bigger stuff. But for this, it's record it, and then it lives on forever.
I know, it just sits there for anyone to discover.
Forever.
Is that strange to you?
I mean, conceptually, no.
Yeah.
But it's kind of a sea change for the way that I work because there's a little more pressure for each moment to be good. Whereas before, it's like, oh, so I screwed up that guitar solo. Whoops. Oh, well.
I'll fix it on the next one.
Yeah. Hope nobody noticed. They're all drunk anyways. So, this is a little different. Right? I'm doing something that's going to be heard by multiple thousands of people, which that I'm used to. Okay. Yeah. I've done festivals. I've done things with 10, 20,000 people. Fine. That doesn't bother me. But the fact that it never goes away. So any mistake I make is permanent.
That's so interesting.
Right? Everything that I release is done with Sharpie.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Yeah.
So it's different. I'm learning a lot more things to do with studio work and how that works in Linux, because my entire workflow is in Linux. Now, granted, I use one program in Wine for cleaning up audio. But aside from that, everything is done with Linux native applications.
Which is fairly impressive if you've heard anything about audio stuff on the shows, right? It's really seemed to come a long way in the last few years.
Right.
But also you've had this really incredible juxtaposition of interest, right? Linux and audio. And so I imagine the last several years you've been playing with all this stuff.
Well, and it's also getting ready to change again.
Right.
So for anybody listening, I know that it's 2025 for you now. But for us here, it is mid-August 2019. So just to give you a little bit of context, that's what's happening right now is we are migrating or, planning to migrate, at least some people, from Pulse Audio to Pipewire. Now that's, something that's happening in Fedora right now. We'll see who all picks it up, but it looks great. And the idea is that it's going to kind of merge all of the Linux sound servers into one Uber server that is low latency and wonderful.
This sounds too good to be true.
It does sound too good to be true, and I'm a little skeptical. I'm also really crossing my fingers because if they can accomplish everything that their goals say that they want to accomplish, it is going to be hands down way better than what we got now.
We should be moving forward all the time. So that sounds par for the course.
Yeah. So fingers crossed. And maybe a year from now, my workflow will be different, simpler, better,
less error prone.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've got the error threshold down pretty far.
All right.
So part of that is moving all of my workflow to Jack. I always have Jack on. And that helps a lot for me. So I don't know. We'll see what happens with Pipewire. I got my fingers crossed.
Well, I'll cross mine for you.
I'm a little hopeful, but I'm also a little skeptical.
Do you have any interest in sort of joining that project in some way to try to help them out?
Maybe. I don't know. I don't code.
Yeah, of
is
course.
The thing. So like QA testing, that sort of thing. Yeah, I can do that. If you show me how to integrate this with my current setup,
right.
I'm happy to test. I'm happy to file bugs. I'm happy to talk with developers about, workflow and use case scenarios so that, maybe they understand a little bit better about targets.
Well, and real world workflows too.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, this is what I'm doing. This is what I need. How do you help me get there? So I'm happy to do all of that. And I might write an email.
I think you should.
Yeah.
Have you ever had that kind of relationship with a piece of software before? Because I know you host some of your own repositories and stuff like that. But
I have. I've done some work with various random GitHub authors. I did do some report filing with Regolith Linux, which is sort of like the Ubuntu i3 world. Yeah, I mean, here and there, but I've never gotten really super deep with a project.
Well, it sounds like Pipewire might be the project for you in some sense, because you're sort of behind it, hoping it goes where it wants to go.
True, maybe.
And I'd imagine you'd have a lot of input.
Well, maybe I'll go write an email. See, I got to figure out who the lead dev is and go shake some digital hands.
Nice. Is there anywhere you want to sort of connect people to, like send people to find you?
So I'm on Twitter. I'm not super active.
Maybe people will start convincing you to be active.
I'm trying, man. I try. I forget about it, and then...
Yeah, you're doing fine. I'm the same way, so don't worry about it.
I look at it pretty much every day, and I think about writing a tweet, and then I'm like...
You got to ship, man. You got to ship.
I know. Do people care? Like, is this thing that I'm thinking about food right now, is this actually interesting, or am I just forcing it? You know? So...
Well, I think it sort of goes with living out your own, you had described how you can be just a Drew now.
Right, yeah.
And I think, we've obviously spent some time together in person, sure. And a Drew is fairly fascinating to me. I'm just a one person, right? But there's something about some of the knowledge that you have and some of the perspectives that you have that are really quite intriguing. And I'd imagine some other people would appreciate those.
Well, so interestingly, in my last job, it was required that all of my social media be set to private.
Oh.
Because we had very conservative clients. And I'm not the most conservative person. Not to get into the realm of politics really here, but essentially it was everybody who worked at that company was not allowed to be public with their views, because any client could then see on Facebook, oh, they support this or they don't support this or whatever, or Twitter or anything. And then that could reflect poorly on the company. I personally disagreed with that policy.
Right.
But it was the terms of hiring.
Okay.
So I didn't have any choice in the matter. So now I actually can be like, hey, this is me. Hi.
Hi.
Hey.
My social presence isn't owned by a company anymore.
Right. I'm no longer a corporate shill. Yeah. So I don't know. It's kind of a new experiment for me. I was on social media like before all of that too, but I just, I've never been super active, and I know I need to be better about it. So,
I mean, only if you want to. There's no sense in forcing such a thing if it doesn't work for you. Like if it's a detriment to you.
So I'm on Twitter. I'm at Drew of Doom. I have an Instagram that probably hasn't had a post in 6 months.
Right.
Also Drew of Doom.
And you're on some shows here, JB.
I am on some shows. I'm on Choose Linux. So go and listen to Choose Linux. Joe Ressington and Elle and I try to, I say try, I think we succeed. We keep the joy of discovering Linux alive by trying everything we can.
You have a random spinner that chooses? Is that how it works?
We've been doing the random button on DistroWatch.
All right.
Just trying to keep that discovery and that spark of joy alive of, this is why we all got into it. Why stop learning about it?
It's so exciting, too, to find even an app, right? You're mentioning an app. An app can change your way of working.
Uh-huh. Or even just like a cool web page that is covering some segment that you want to know about, but maybe didn't know you wanted to know about. Like,
you're describing my everyday.
Yeah, right? Like, 10 years ago, it was like crack.com was our portal to the weird and the wonderful. And yeah, now it's just, I'm finding totally more useful things than that, like dealing with Linux and open source and stuff that I really care about. So it's great.
And how do you typically discover the weird and wonderful in your world? Like, what are the sources for you to discover some of this stuff?
Well, as you get a little older, you start to realize that the weird and the wonderful is all around you. And sometimes just taking a walk and keeping your eyes open is all you need. Or, just hop on Reddit for 5 minutes. I've got some subs that are quite enjoyable for that very reason. So,
Is there a particular one you want to send out there and share the wealth?
Oh man, what's a good one? Oh, 11'8".
Okay.
All right. There's a bridge in, I think it's Raleigh, North Carolina, that is 11 foot 8 inches tall. And they have high quality cameras pointed at this thing for every time a truck hits it.
I see where this is going.
All
Yeah.
right. It's the 11 foot 8 bridge.
Okay.
So check that one out. Yeah. So let's point people towards that. 11foot8.reddit.com. Just go laugh at some dumb truck drivers who just ignore all the signs and drive their car into a can opener.
Okay. I think that is a fabulous place to leave our viewers. I said viewers, but they're actually listeners. Well, thanks, Drew, for sitting down with me. This is always a pleasure. We're going to have to do this again.
Can we get a high five on Mike?
Yeah, we can. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Well done.
Yes.
Well done.
Very pleasant talking to you this morning. I enjoyed my brunch, and the eggs were delicious.
That's Brunch with Brent.